We're going to go ahead and get started shortly. I'm waiting for 12 o'clock on the dot. All right, so there it is. So welcome to Academic Black Table Talk, a platform designed to elevate Black voices, knowledge, and expertise within Minnesota State, with special attention to elevating the voices of Black women, because I'm one, and it's simply not done enough. I am Dr. Watts with North Hennepin Community College and organizer of these important conversations. I designed this platform to serve as a learning resource for our listeners, as scholar practitioners and human beings who live daily and resiliently in Black bodies within an anti-Black world. It is extremely invaluable to impart to you our expertise from both a professional and lived experience to help inform your personal allyship and your organizational approach to drive effective racial justice, equity, and inclusion efforts. So for today, we have a lot of topics on the table, as we typically do. We'll have some time for Q&A, so you can start loading your questions if you'd like. I'll do our best to get through all of them. But let me start by introducing to you our panelists. Joining us today are Maya Sullivan, who is Dean of Students at Metropolitan State University, where she has strategic leadership of several student success departments and serves as Title IX coordinator. Maya holds a Juris Doctor degree and has nearly 20 years of experience investigating, educating on, or practicing law related to civil rights and discrimination. Welcome, Maya. We also have Venerine Brown Botswain, Director of Diversity and Multiculturalism with Anoka Ramsey Community College and Anoka Technical College. She received her master's in education, student personnel services, and counseling. She is a business owner and joins us with over 18 years in higher education. No stranger to our table. Welcome, Venerine. We also have Dr. Brittany M. Williams, PhD, an assistant professor of higher education at St. Cloud State University. She studies the experiences of Black women and girls in education through career and identity development, social class, and HIV/AIDS prevention context. She is currently a 2020-2021 American Association for University Women Fellow and holds multiple grants and awards. Welcome. We also have joining us Dr. Egypt Grandison, assistant professor and the first Black woman in the business administration department at Bemidji State University with over 7 years of teaching experience. She also serves as advisor to the inaugural Black Student Union and is co-publishing a paper titled The Experiences of Black Professors at Predominantly White Colleges in Minnesota. I have a guest facilitator joining me today. Yes, we have with us Dr. Jonathan Locust, Associate Vice President for Equity and Inclusive Excellence at Winona State University. He is a certified Six Sigma Black Belt with a thorough understanding of the DMAIC model to improve process efficiency. He leads his equity work by focusing on the most efficient process that leads to equitable outcomes. And no stranger to our panel as well. And I'm Dr. Ida Watts, Associate Vice President of Equity and Inclusion, social justice trainer and speaker with over 20 years in both the public and private sectors. And I must say that as a human bridge builder, I am extremely pleased that so many of you have found value in these panel conversations. So my intention, and keyword intention, is to be a quasi-panelist today, which is why I've invited Dr. Locust. So I will volley questions back and forth, Jonathan Locust and I will, over the next 40 minutes or so. And again, you can load your questions and we will do our best to get through as many as we can towards the end. So first, I would like to welcome you all and then take a moment of pause as we think back to the latest occurrence with the Breonna Taylor case. While I'm not asking anyone to dive into the specifics or the politics, my question to you all is, how did the Breonna Taylor case impact you or other Black women, whether it's employee or students, on your campuses? This is a check-in moment. So whoever would like to go first.
Well, for me, it kind of shocked me because when I think of police work, I never thought or never knew that they can just knock it into your home just like that. So it kind of made me reevaluate, where I stand and who I am in this area. The other part of it that really got me is the invisibility of women, that as women, it's not to say that all of these cases are not important, but without other voices trying to raise Breonna up, she would have been gone and we would not have known anything about it. So it's that invisibility that, I experience in the college settings that I've worked in. It just reminded me of that, in terms of, so often we're expected to do a lot, both in our families and at home, but yet we are still invisible. We're superwoman, but yet invisible superwoman. So, that's how I feel about that.
I had a very visceral reaction to the case because I'm originally from Atlanta. And when I was in high school, there was a grandmother killed here named Katherine Johnston because of a no-knock warrant at the hands of the Atlanta Police Department. She fired back, very similar in the Breonna Taylor case, thinking that someone was breaking into her home and trying to protect her home, her family, and herself, and was eventually killed. And so immediately when this came out, I started feeling all of the emotions I felt as a teenager, where I'm trying to think of, okay, what does it mean where if you're not safe in your own home and you can't exist and be who you are in your own home, where can you do that? Particularly for those of us who are Black women. And so I got the sense that we've come so far in terms of raising awareness around policing issues, raising awareness around injustice issues, and yet there have been no structural changes. And that means that we are still suffering at the hands of this violence. So for me, it felt like a continuation of something that at this point I'm almost unfortunately used to, something that I've come to expect, and something that I've come to expect that disproportionately impacts Black women, because very rarely do we march for Black women to the same degree that we do for other folks who are victims of injustice and violence. Oftentimes, the gender disparities in policing are downplayed because we spend so much time talking about how many men are impacted by police violence that we forget just how much this issue is personal and impactful to Black women. So for me, it brought up a whole bunch of disparate emotions around this. Already happened when I was a child. I didn't have the language to describe it in the same ways that I can now, but I have the language now, and there's nothing structurally that I can do about it other than raise awareness. I can teach my students. I can help people to see how this is an issue and what it means for our livelihoods, for our long-term outcomes as Black people, but I can't force people to see my humanity, right? And so at the core of this, for me, it brought up the police don't see our humanity, and we need to try to bridge some gaps there. I don't know what that answer is, though.
I was thinking about this and your question, Dr. Ida. So I think for me, I start with at the time when we first learned about Breonna Taylor, it was already in the middle of a pandemic, one pandemic, two really. So that was already happening. We'd already kind of had Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd came shortly thereafter. And so there were all these different things, and also all the unknowns that we don't know, the names that we don't know. And so I was thinking about it because for me, like being dean of students, there are a lot of students who I come into contact with for various different reasons. And they share, like, look, I'm just plain tired. I don't know. I can't, I'm in school. I'm trying to better myself. I'm trying to improve myself. all this is going on. Some of my teachers do and others don't understand that I don't want to leave school, but I also have all this, all these other layers that I am dealing with and trying to be successful. And it's not really something that you can understand unless you are in the shoes to understand it. And the idea of the kind of being overlooked and that type of thing that comes up for women, but also oftentimes more specifically Black women and even other women of color, I think is real. I mean, I was thinking actually in relation to Breonna Taylor, when they released some more of the video footage of what took place at the apartment on the evening of the event, there was a moment when her EMT jacket was visible. And an officer said to another officer, "Oh, it looks like one of our EMTs left their jacket." And so then her boyfriend was saying, "No, that's Brianna's jacket." And then there was this shock kind of that they express or they share. So it's kind of like, there's no way she could have been an EMT. She could have been something different, nothing on that level. But she couldn't have been an EMT who was studying to become a nurse. And so that whole idea of being overlooked is real.
Mhm. Thank you, Maya. Dr. Egypt, any thoughts on that?
I definitely agree with both Dr. Brittany and Dr. Maya. Um, it's also because I keep hearing police officers as well, and they should have been aware or something should have been different. But then that also kind of it's almost like it's a double-edged sword, almost like you have police officers and they are supposed to protect, serve and protect. And they do, but then you also look at, you have to separate the bad ones from the good ones. So how do you do that? Because although as Dr. Brittany said, we have to figure out how to bridge the gap, but we have no steps or no strategies to do it. But it's also something else that has to be worked on first before we can even get to that point. And that's the police officers, the police department. And granted, all police officers are not bad, because I have really good friends that are police officers back in Huntsville, Alabama. So hopefully they won't get me, hey, if they're watching, but they're not all bad. But I do believe something has to change. Something has to change. Just not sure how we go about doing it.
And thank you for sharing that, for all of you who shared, because I don't think that Black women are asked, "Are you okay?" enough, particularly in such traumatizing situations. So I will answer as well that it was very impactful for me, extremely impactful. I mean, it was racially traumatizing, racially fatiguing, and also for the Black female students. I held a number of listening sessions, and it was very interesting that it's not an isolated feeling, right? You see yourself. There's an essence of yourself that you see when these situations occur. So I just wanted to be sure I checked in. Thank you.
And I'll just add, thank you all for sharing. And I want to follow up with the next question to see how those feelings, those real feelings of what you all are experiencing, how that actually translate into higher education. So being Black women at predominantly white institutions, what do you all do or when you're seeking a mentor, specifically a mentor of color? And do you feel at times that you speak for all Black women, specifically now that people are starting to understand what Black Lives Matter is?
I can start it off. Definitely do feel like I speak for all Black women to a certain extent. To a certain extent, I accept it but then sometimes people tend to run left with it. Because although we're all Black women, our situations, our circumstances, our experiences are not the same. I personally, I do work at a predominantly white institute. And as far as finding a mentor, I have to think outside the box. More or less, I have to find a group of women that are probably thousands of miles away from me, which that's what I'm doing now, because I don't have anyone that looks like me that could help me. Although, don't get me wrong, we do have a mentorship program at the university I work at. However, my experiences or the future experiences I'm going to experience per se to get to the next level of my career is something totally different than for a woman that's not of color, if you get my drift. So it does make it challenging because that woman that's not Black or of color, she can share her experiences with me. She can tell me what she did. But at the end of the day, is it going to be that easy for me to transition or move up to the next level of my career?
When it comes to mentors, in institutions I've worked in higher education, if we're talking specifically about Black women, um, there there haven't been any at or really above the level anyway, of where I was in my role, and so there have been Black men, but not usually Black women. So certainly there's developing those relationships, but I think when I think about the relationships I've established in terms of mentorship and those type of things with other Black women, there are some that I've established relationships with, but in terms of those who are at perhaps a level ahead of me or something of that nature, they have not been usually at my institution. And so I've had to kind of reach out to others outside of my institution in order to do that.
Oh, I appreciate the question, Jonathan, that you asked because it speaks to the importance of role models. And when I think about this question, coming from a place of poverty, we're not a monolith, right? So not everyone has the same background. But in my story, coming from a place of poverty, doing my best, always in my academic journey, excelling. But what that meant as a first generation college student, there was just so far I could see, right? And I'm not Oprah. Oprah is for that person over there. So what I'm getting at is it wasn't until I found myself, because I had to look for it, but I found myself in a networking environment of Black academics, doctors all over, men and women, Black people. That was the first time, and I've grown by that point. That was the first time that I thought, you know what? I think I can do this. What? Because up until that point, it's not a matter of underachieving, not wanting to do great, but if you have grown up in a particular mindset, right? There's just so far you're going to make it. That's just as far as you're going to reach. So I appreciate that question when it comes to mentorship and role models, because it is hard to find as a Black woman. It's, I will take anyone who wants to be my mentor, a white man, provost, president, but then you don't know if people want to mentor you like that, right?
So, as I'm listening to you all, I think it's important to point out this is not new, right? So, at the early 20th century, Countee Cullen and Langston Hughes were debating this concept of can you be, a Black poet or can you just be a poet as a Black person, right? So, there's always this responsibility we have as Black women, we have as Black people in holding the positions of power that we have. We owe it to the folks who are behind us to be that sort of representation that of what you can be, right? Marion Wright Edelman says you can't be what you can't see. So we owe that piece to them. But then we also owe it to folks to make sure we're lifting as we're climbing. And so I think higher education creates this scarcity dynamic and this sort of scarcity thought complex or idea or construct, if you will, where it makes us nervous to mentor people because we're scared if I help the next person up, then maybe there won't be a position for me later. Or maybe I'm going to hit my version of the glass ceiling and I can't continue forward because there's only space for one of us at the table, right? And so my answer to that is always, well, forget it. We can build a new table or we can add an extension to the table, or maybe we don't need to be at this table at all and we can start another one outside, right? And so I think a lot of this goes back to how often are we allowed to be our most authentic selves in higher education? And how often can we have those relationships with people where you get the fulfillment you need professionally, you get the fulfillment you need personally, and that goes to what Dr. Watts is talking about, right? Dr. Ida's talking about. How can I be my whole self, right? So maybe with some mentors, it's purely academic. With other mentors, it's more social. With other mentors, it's more emotional. And maybe I get a little bit of all three with someone else. And so there has to be a degree of strategy. It just, to be quite honest, it sucks that it's always on us to figure those pieces out instead of people reaching out to us to say, I see you, I see your talent, I see your brilliance. These are the ways that I can nurture it. It's always on us to go and ask people to do that for us. Although Black women are a large growing body of students in higher education, right? So there are so many Black college women, but that's not reflected in the number of Black women college presidents we have. It's not reflected in the number of vice presidents that we have. And so it's a multi-layered complex issue. And it's one that, I don't think any of us are going to solve because we'll be having this debate 100 years from now, probably.
I don't look within the environment that I work in currently for mentorship. I definitely, there are other people in the larger system that we're friends and we share information, and some of the information that is provided to me, I can say is a mentoring type of relationship. I don't know that we see each other as mentors. However, one of my commitment is to always be open to students, to assist them, to pull them up, to lead them, to guide them, even sometimes when they don't see the best in themselves. I am making that commitment to them, and I see that as part of my job. So, while I don't call myself a mentor, I see myself as a mentor to them, to help them to get to where they see themselves. And sometimes they don't even see themselves there, but to encourage them to get there.
And one follow-up question I was going to ask, especially since we know as Black people, we have not been in the curriculum and represented in history like we have actually been a part of history. So you as Black women, who are some historical Black women figures or present day Black women that you have even looked to for either for guidance or for motivation? I ask that not only for us to know, but for the rest of Minnesota to know, because there's a strong possibility they may or may not know who these names are. So if we can maybe just share who are some of those Black women that you all have leaned into to really educate us, so we know we can start doing our research.
Mm-hmm. I had the pleasure of meeting Maya Angelou a few years ago. And she was just most impressive to me. And one of the things that she did, and I've never seen this done before, it was at another university that I was working at the time, and they had her there, and they were going to house her. But what the person thought is that if they had her in the dean's office, in the dean's house, then she would be so pleased. And she straightened that out. And then when they called her Maya, she says, "Excuse me, my friends call me Maya." And as far as I know, you are not one of them. So to you, I am Miss Angelo. And the way she said it and the voice that she said it in is that always stuck with me. And it gave me a sense of a woman that was confident in herself, that she's not, when you come with titles or positions and you have things, that does not mean anything to her. And that is not what sway her, but who she is and what it is that she is about. And she is definitely one of my heroes.
Well, I'm going to jump in the interest of time. I'll choose a current day one because I used one of her quotes in a meeting where I was definitely being microaggressed. And that is Michelle Obama. And that quote was, "When they go low, we go high." So, she's not necessarily someone that I've looked to per se, but I admire her journey and I appreciate the resilience, right, that she's had to stand in that truth when it seemed like so many darts and just hatred was being thrown her way based on the melanin in her skin. So for that, she's a powerful truth that I appreciate.
I'll name someone that I consider to be a sort of unsung or lesser known hero, and that's Rathea Clark King. She actually was recruited to Minnesota to be president of Metro State. And after there, went on to have a long storied career at General Mills and was one of the first Black women that I knew of holding a big VP position at a Fortune 100 company, that being General Mills. When I'm pretty sure I was in elementary school, I did a project on her because I was trying to figure out who's the most powerful Black woman in the world kind of thing. And then I found this woman who's a vice president. Oh, great. You're in elementary school. That makes sense. And so she's someone that I unfortunately haven't met in person, but I know through other people because of her history here in Atlanta and some other ways. And just seeing how she navigated moving to Minnesota, making these career jumps, making decisions to sort of take the corporate world by storm and do it in her own way, I think is something very powerful. And it allowed me to see that I could also someday become a college president, that I could also use my savvy, my knowledge, my business mindset to show myself and other Black women that we can hold these roles and we can do it with authenticity and we can be ourselves. So I think she's amazing. And that's someone that I definitely look up to.
So I want to flip it on all of you because, this is family, so I can talk that way, right? So my question to you now is based on that same thread, right? The importance of mentorship and role modeling. Tell me a little bit about how students have perceived or interacted with you when it comes to this idea of being a scholar or scholar practitioner in your roles. Have students sought you out? Tell me a little bit more about that. What type of students? Is it across the board? How does it look like? What do the students say?
Well, I'll go first. So because I do work at a predominantly white institute, it's a little bit different opposed to someone being at a more diverse institute. They don't come up to me. They tend to stand back in the background a little bit and kind of watch you. And I'm just speaking from what I've observed over the year that I've been at BSU. The first semester, they're kind of like a little shocked because I am a Black woman. I am, a professional Black woman. And a lot of my students here have not seen that before. So the next semester, that's when they start seeking me out. That's when they wanted to start having conversations, and they were in awe, especially with the bio that I do at the beginning of the semester. You kind of do an introduction of yourself and then you let the students introduce themselves as well. They don't say it out loud. They'll email me or they'll try to come into the office, prior to COVID but they do seek me out. But I kind of have to pull information out from them to kind of see exactly what they're looking for or what it is that I can help them accomplish. And these are my non-Black students. So they see us, they just don't know how to approach us, so to speak. And I don't know if you ladies have had the same experience. It's like they don't come right out to ask questions. They kind of hang back a little bit, or they'll wait to see if someone else asks the question, or they'll catch you when you're by yourself and try to, I'll say, beat around the bush per se.
You know, I'm thinking about what you're saying, Dr. Egypt, and so I don't teach at Metro State. I actually do teach in at other institutions, but I don't teach at Metro State, and so but I do hear and see students of all backgrounds, you know, approaching me, you know, in the hallway and things like that when we are obviously in person. But it made me think about an encounter I had with a student maybe during my first year at Metro. And we'd been emailing, and she scheduled a time to come in and meet with me. And my office is in the very back of the suite of about 15 offices. And so I walked to the front to walk with her back to my office. And I got out front and I said, I introduced myself. And I saw that she kind of looked, you know, like surprised possibly. Um, and so we got down the hallway and we got into my office, and I shut the door and, you know, welcomed her in. And she said, I have to tell you something. I thought you were going to be an old white man. And it's because people were just saying Dean Sullivan, Dean Sullivan. And so she thought she thought I was an old white man. She's like, you're not old, a man or white. And she said to me, this might sound kind of odd, but can I give you a hug? Because I've never met a Black woman in a role like this before. And I said, absolutely. I gave her a hug. I wouldn't normally, you know, hug students, but she asked. And so I definitely did. And we went on about the conversation, but it made me think that, you know, so just as I may feel like, okay, well, I'm a dean and that's great. But there are other, you know, higher level positions that exist. But in her eyes and in the eyes of many, the fact that you are there in that role is huge. It is significant. And there is to them that is, you know, kind of a ceiling almost in terms of what they would have expected. And so, you know, to me, I feel it's my role also, though. So you see me here, you could be here. So you finish, you continue, and you could be here. And as a matter of fact, you could be in a place higher than where I am right now. And so I just think about those kind of interactions with students, which are so meaningful, and knowing that just your very presence there has made such a significant impact on them.
Thank you for sharing that. That's powerful. That is really powerful. One question I had, kind of even running parallel to that, what type of campus climate conditions do leaders need to do to take into account to make sure that more Black women can be recruited and retained throughout the Mid-State system? What do we need to be doing?
I think the first thing that needs to happen is, first of all, don't think you need to recreate the wheel, because you do not. Seek out other institutes that have done it successfully or they're doing it successfully. Team up with them, see what they're doing, see how they're doing it. Sit down and have a conversation with uh, the diverse people you have at your institute and find out, hey, before you came here or when you was looking for employment, what did you look for, or what it is that what do you need to help you stay here, or what can we offer you? Sometimes a conversation is just needed. You can't assume things because you have one or two people of color at your institute. To me, that doesn't qualify you as a diverse campus. You have to do a little bit more. So I would say, first, reach out to other institutes that are doing it successfully. and the ones that have done it successfully and see what they're doing. Easy is an easy conversation that could happen.
I I have more of a duh answer. Hire Black women. It to me, it's just a very basic thing that folks can do, right? And so one of the things that attracted me to Penn State is also one of the things that frustrates me about being here, and that's our unions and our contracts, right? So if you look at the structure of them, a lot of times when cuts have to be made, which we know we're in an era of higher education where we're having financial instability, there needs to be mergers, there are going to be more closures. COVID is not helping us in that, right? So when you think about that and you think about the structure of our contracts, oftentimes the last person in is the first person to go. Well, because we're at historically white institutions, that last person is probably Black and probably a woman. And so there needs to be more of a focus on equity broadly and more on how do we not only recruit folks and how do we create conditions for them to stay here, but how do we retain them within that, right? And so often it's always about how do we get people on campus and not about how we keep them. We need to pay folks. We need to pay them for their expertise, and we need to continuously do that. We need to make sure that we are demanding of the other leaders at our institution fairness and equity mindedness. I don't care if you agree with me. I don't want to work anywhere where everyone agrees with me. That sounds like an awful workplace and an echo chamber. I'm not interested, right? And I think we're at our sharpest when we're debating people who are going to help us, right? Iron sharpens iron. But you don't have to agree with me in order to see my humanity. And you don't have to agree with me in order to believe that, you know, for all intents and purposes, that Black lives matter. And so I think at the very core and at the very basis of this is hiring folks and then reprimanding and taking action when people create conditions where folks can't stay here. I'm a faculty member. I know I have a little bit more privilege. I'm not tenured yet. And so I can say things that some of my colleagues who are administrators can't. Talk to folks on your institution who have a little bit more power, who know how to work some things behind the scenes. I'm blessed to be in a department with a department chair who is very well connected, and I can go to him and say, okay, look, this is what I'm seeing. Do I understand this institutional context right, or am I missing something? Find folks who can help you fill in the gaps and who can do some of those things behind the scenes. And that is how you get, retain, and keep Black women on campus. But there has to be a serious concerted effort. And it even reminds me of this question that's down here in the Zoom chat where someone's asking about, what do you do when you see folks are victims of systemic racism, or how do you navigate that? My entire dissertation research was about Black women administrators who were pushed out of their campuses. Half of my participants left higher ed despite having degrees in higher education. And the other half decided to stay and fight for another day, right? And so I think we need to vocalize and normalize that those things are going to happen, that institutions will not be places that can necessarily serve the best interests of us, but that we as people can serve the best interest of one another and then push the institution to do the same.
I love that, Dr. Brittany, because part of what I was going to say as well, right? We need to stop focusing on visual compositional diversity, right? So let's get in a whole bunch of Black women, but what are we doing when it comes to retaining? So what that requires is an audit, an institutional audit, a department audit. What are those microaggressive, misogynistic, because we're talking about dealing with or we have to think about our intersectional identity. So yes, Black and also gender, we're women, right? So what are those nuances that are happening so that the Black women in those areas in our patriarchal systems are feeling forced out or are being forced out? And until there's an investment to truly change and audit those structures, then all we're doing is we're bringing people into a broken system that wasn't meant to include them.
You know, that is so true, because, you know, as I'm listening to everyone speak, is that the system itself at the system level is already broken. You know, there's so many knots in it as it wants to diversify that it's hard to even bring it down to the college level. And everyone at the college level is looking to the system to do whatever it is that they do. And all they keep on doing is replicating in things. It takes a very strong person within a college as a Black woman to make the changes that are necessary. Because I know I don't feel like I have the voice. I try to have the voice, but others, I'm either dismissed or, you know, there are so many other ways that it's happening. And individuals tap themselves on the back. Well, you know, we have diversity. You know, we're talking about diverse issues. Half of them don't understand what you're doing. You know, I sit in a meeting and I hear, you know, I see people being microaggressed. And if I don't point it out, which you know, it's hard sometimes because then it becomes, you are the troublemaker. And, you know, individuals are there that they don't understand it. And when you just, after a while, it gets tiring. Actually, it does get tiring.
Wow, I almost forgot I had to ask the next question. I was just sitting there just listening. I wanted to just I wanted to ask a question because even when we see what's happening with Black women and Black women really taking a huge role in entrepreneurship, and we mentioned earlier that Venerine having a business, and even what Dr. Watts is doing is very entrepreneurial. This in itself. So can you talk a little bit about how Black women are maybe taking this sense of being oppressed and turning it into a creative space to create something new for opportunities where people can learn?
I wish I could answer the question in the manner in which you ask it. My my business is one that it's a passion I have. I do mediation, and I do mediation outside of here. And I started doing mediation in the community, where I go into various community mediation centers and provide it for them. And then, you know, it got to the point where, okay, the post office wants mediators. And that's how I became one that is doing this as a business for it, because you don't do volunteer for the post office, you charge them. But, you know, as I do that, you know, I think part of it is that one of the issues I find for myself is that even as individual want my services, what that are not mediating, you know, it's not mediation, or even if it is mediation, and you know, now in the world of everybody wants to be woke and they are seeking you out, it's hard for me to come up and say, there is a fee that is there for me to charge you. And part of it is that we're not trained enough to be able to do that. You know, it's just one of those things. Well, you're giving, but when the others come, they give, they take, and they give them big fee, and nobody questioned that. However, I'm always being aware that when we bring people, and especially people of color, into the college, that we're paying them, because too often we take them for granted.
Yeah, I agree. And it's so important. I know there's conversations about being more deliberate with bringing in minority-owned businesses and those identifying as women-owned businesses as well. It's absolutely critical because, as Venerine mentioned, there tends to be, again, we're talking about the intersectionality here. We can't get away from that, right? So there tends to be this desire from folks to request help, but not pay for it. However, other folks are getting paid for the same exact work. So, you know, research has showed, and Dr. Brittany, this is your area of expertise, but research has shown that there is a pay inequity, that is, the pay gap is even that much larger when it comes to Black women. So we're already making pennies on the dollar. Then on top of that, we're supposed to do this extra work and not get paid for it. So I forgot what your question was, Dr. Locust, but yes, we need to have an entrepreneurial spirit. But as Venerine mentioned, we have to seek that out because it's not something that's automatically imparted to us. It's just not. Oh, and I think I may have the next question, or you want to go for it, Dr. Locust?
I was gonna say, well, you definitely answered it. One question that I see that I think that also is important, that was posed, as a person that is raising a Black daughter, whether a Black man and someone who is without a Black woman role model. How can parents make the most impact in their lives by raising Black daughters? What are things that they should be teaching? What are things that they should be showing for, again, someone who does not have a Black woman role model in the household?
That's a complex question, but I'll give it a try. I think one of the most powerful things or turns that happened for me was when someone told me I did not have to prioritize being a wife and mother in order to be important. And as someone who is very career oriented, who is goal oriented, who wants a family, but not the typical definition of how we describe family, I needed to hear that because I didn't know that that could exist, right? Very often from young ages, we socialize girls into caretaking roles. We give them dolls, we give them, play stoves, we give them all of these toys that reinforce this gender binary and says this here is women's work. And then we do very different things for little boys, right? And so for me, I think the most powerful thing you can do is figure out what your daughter's talent is and nurture that. I was a blabber mouth. I got in trouble all the time for quote unquote talking back, having a smart mouth, all of these things. And do you know what my mom did? She put me in debate. And I was a 7-time debate champion in the state of Georgia. I went against students from public schools. I'm an Atlanta public school kid through and through. I'm the proud product of Atlanta public schools, where, we had a Black superintendent and I was able to see all these Black women superheroes. But I was also able to compete against students whose parents were paying $35,000 for them to go to private school. And I kicked their butt in middle school in debate because my parents saw that skill within me. And so I think part of it is looking at your children and seeing what are the talents and things that they can do, not necessarily what you want them to do. I thought that me being a blabbermouth, loudmouth would result in me becoming a lawyer, because when you're a kid, that's the natural next step. That's where you see women who are strong and vocal taking the stage. And then I detoured here to education, and I feel like I'm able to hone my skills and do those things that are most important to me. So I think listening to your daughters, talking to them, and then being very frank with them that, there are barriers, systemic barriers that are in their way, but there are people that can help them get around it.
Even with a Black woman in the home, my first daughter, one of the ways, because she was in a very white environment, that I did discussions with her is by bringing books in, and having those dialogues, having her read the book and then just having us talk about what it is to be a Black person. What does that mean? What does your here mean? What does it mean when you don't get invited to the parties? And, trying to help them to understand that whole meaning of just being a person of color. Because I've worked with individuals in other settings where that discussion was not held with them, and I see what that did to the young people, where they don't believe even that they don't see themselves as being Black, and the rejection that they get and not really know it. So I really, that's one of the ways that I went about doing that.
So I'm going to jump in here and ask the next question. We have about 12 minutes or so left. Our time is really going by fast, and I feel like we're just biting into the apple. But this is a very important question. Someone touched upon it earlier, and it was asked of us. So working in higher education, when you see, we spoke about Black women being pushed out, or knowing of many that either endure or just can't take it anymore. So when you think about that scenario, whether we're talking about you or a friend, what helps these women persist, or what helps you persist in these particular environments? And the question also says, in what ways does it motivate you or deflate you? Remember, we're only talking about a friend, somebody not you.
I think for me, the motivation or what keeps me going is even if someone is telling me I can't do it, even if they're implying that I can't do it, in my head, I'm thinking, I'm going to show you. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it probably better than you're going to do it, or better than you expect me to do it. So it's almost like the negativity, I feed off of that. And because I know me and I know what I'm capable of, I know what I'm able to do, I know what I've done, so I know what I can do. So it's that negative vibe, those negative vibes, or those words, or those naysayers, or someone trying to push you out or think they pushing you out. I feed off that. I feed off of it. And it's quite fulfilling, I may add, because I keep going. I keep going. I keep pushing through.
One of the things that motivates me probably is my daughters. So I have two 13-year-olds. I have twins. So I have twin girls who kind of related to that question about raising a Black daughter, who see me and see, the role that I have and the roles that I have had in their life. So before I was in higher education, I practiced law. And so a lot of the people that I know are either lawyers or administrators or other roles in higher education. And it's so funny because we were talking the other day and they said, well, for some reason, almost everybody has either been a lawyer or been this. So this must be these must be common careers for Black women. And I said, they're not. And they said, well, why is it that they were asking me, well, why is it that almost all the people have had these careers? And I said, that's because those are the people that I know. And I know other people as well, but it's not that common. But for them, it looks like it is a common thing. And so for me, I take them as a motivation because I want to be that image for them to not just do what I've done, do whatever they want to do to the best that they can, but also to be successful in their lives and to think that like this is not a floor or a ceiling. Like I can go and I can do a whole lot of other things. So they're big motivators for me.
Well, I'll say I felt that, Dr. Egypt, and also Maya. But yes, give me that fuel, because I as well use it to skyrocket to the top. The more you try to crush the olive, you get that refined olive oil that everyone needs. And it's so pure, it's like gold. So I am right there with you. It gets tiring for the person who asked that question. It's extremely fatiguing. I'll just leave it at that, but we press through.
Well, one of the things I would say that, I have a daughter that thinks exactly like that, but I was not one of those people. It does impact me. And what I've learned is to be able to lean on others. And this is where a mentor comes in place, to be able to go and say, this is what I'm experiencing. Because my mentors have really been cheerleaders. And they show me what it is that's within me that sometimes I myself don't see. So that helps to motivate me to go in. But also my motivation is that another Black person will not come back here and experience what I've just experienced. So my experience is to change what I've just experienced.
And I guess kind of the final question that I would have is, as we have people on here, what is something that you would like people to know about either you, about Black women that somebody may have not necessarily asked before? What is just something that you would want us to know, or a takeaway that either we could know to either treat Black women better? What is something that you all could share with us to give us of what we can do better for Black women?
I think part of it is that we have to see the beauty in each other. And we have to be, remember that even though individuals see us as group, we're individuals. and we respect each other for the individuality that we bring to whatever it is that we do. So, and be encouraging, be encouraging.
Uh, I think for me, the biggest piece is I'm not a superhero. I am not Superwoman. I am a woman and I am human, and Black women are deserving of nurturing, of care, of kindness, and compassion. And one of the things I've noticed as we're in this election season, as we're in this sort of rise of white nationalism season, a lot of people like to say that Black women are going to save us or Black women are going to be our saviors. And that is not what I am here for. I am no one's savior but my own. And so I think if we want to truly support Black women, we need to trust and listen to Black women and not expect Black women to come back and clean up the mess when it's too late. We are not Olivia Pope. That is a character. And while it is based off a real woman, Judy Smith, who I love, she is one person. We are all one people, right? And so, or individuals, if you will. And so I would like for us to get away from this notion that Black women can fix and can save everything. And when I think about that in a higher ed context, the example I always give is Black women usually become university presidents when the college is on the brink of failure. What would happen if you brought a Black woman in before you needed saving? If they can bring you back from literal brink of failure, imagine what would happen if you gave us resources.
That was a microphone drop moment. I just wanted to say that. Go for it, Maya.
Yeah, you know what? I'm just sitting here thinking, I mean, the idea of the whole savior, and there's the whole idea of the strong Black woman, and yes, they exist, but understanding that we also bend and we can also break because we're human beings. And but I think that there's also sometimes this additional side where we sometimes do feel like we do speak for everyone because maybe we are the only one there. And so it's almost like this responsibility. The quote that's behind me on my virtual screen says, "Walking, I'm listening in a deeper way. Suddenly all my ancestors are behind me. Be still," they say. "Watch and listen. You are the result of the love of thousands." It's a quote by a Native American writer, Linda Hogan. And it's actually sits behind me on my wall in my office. Mm-hmm. And every single day I walk into my office, I see it, I look at it, and anyone who comes in and meets with me sees it, and they might not look at it, but they can see it because it's behind me. And I think that in many ways there is that feeling that I do have a responsibility, but I also have a responsibility to take care of myself. And I want others to know that I need to also take care of myself, and that even though I might be the only one, I need to be able to do that. And I think that also engaging us or bringing us into certain conversations, I think is really helpful as well.
Mm-hmm. I definitely agree with Dr. Maya and Dr. Brittany, especially the listening part. Listen to hear us and to understand us. Don't dismiss us per se. And the term "we are strong women," I get that. I get we are strong. We have to be resilient. We have to be. But also, as Dr. Maya said, we still break, we still bend, but be aware of that. Be aware of that. And self-care is very important. But at the end of the day, still see us as well. See us for who we are and what we bring to the table.
Thank you so much, Dr. Egypt, for that finalizing statement. To that, I had written down my notes, and I wrote, "We are delicate. We are delicate." You know, when I spoke about that resilience, and Venerine mentioned as well, having to lean on, yes, that too, right? Having to be resilient, because who has your back? There are tears as well, right? But you can't stand in those tears at work. So it's all of that. And it's recognizing that we are flesh and bone. We are human. Everything that you all said We are also knowledgeable. We are educated. We impart experience. We bring value and truth. And there was a movie, Hidden Figures. We're no longer hidden, and we shall not stay hidden. So I thank all of you today for stepping forth, because we are not hidden. And that is the entire purpose of these discussions and this table today, to show all of our faces and to share our voices. So with that, I want to thank the system office again for helping us share this platform with all of you. I thank Dr. Jonathan Locust for helping to co-facilitate. I thank Dr. Egypt, Amaya, Dr. Brittany, and Venerine for being here today. And I thank all of you. I hope that this has been a resourceful moment for you, and that you will use the tools and pieces of wisdom that you've gathered here today to not only help your colleagues, but also help your students navigate college and achieve success.